साथियों, today we are going to discuss about the difference between the constitution and the constitutionalism. We had the first video on constitution yesterday, and today we are going to differentiate the constitution with what constitutionalism is all about. Normally, there is a confusion among students when they use the word constitutionalism. Let us first understand that the constitution and the constitutionalism, they are inseparable. That is the first thing about the quality of a real constitution, because the constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the constitution was made with a purpose, and the purpose was not only to empower the citizens and the state and the government, but also to put restraints on the exercise of their powers and rights. So we have to understand that constitution gave certain rights to the individual and certain powers to the state and the government, but at the same time the prime concern of the constitution is to prescribe certain principles on the basis of which these both are regulated. The rights are regulated, the exercise of rights is regulated, and the exercise of powers by the state and the government is also regulated. So basically we see that the purpose of a constitution is restrictive. It tries to restrict the given rights to the individual, and it also tries to put certain restraints on the powers and authority of the state and the government. And therefore the essence of the constitution is regulatory, restrictive, limiting, and this is the essence of what we call constitution or constitutionalism. So friends, we can have a constitution which is a form, but we cannot have a constitution without constitutionalism, which is the essence of the constitution. If we try to exemplify a living human being, we can say that the constitution is like a body, but a body without a soul is a dead thing, and we wish to dispose it off very quickly. In the same way, a constitution without constitutionalism is something a dead thing. It's a dead law of the land, you can say, because it doesn't have a constitutionalism. It doesn't have that restrictive, limited spirit within through which it tries to restrain the power and authority of the state and the government on the one hand, and also the exercise of rights and liberties by the individual. So basically, you can compare it, constitution and constitutionalism, with the body and soul. Constitution is the body, it's a structure, it's a set of laws, but the constitutionalism is the essence of that law, the essence of that supreme law, which is the to limit the powers and authority of the state, as well as to regulate the rights and liberties of the individual. So this we have to understand. Now coming to the second thing, that if we try to understand constitutionalism in a better manner, then the issue is that why do we have constitutionalism at all, and how this constitution is inbuilt in the system or in the constitution. You can have a constitution, but you may not have constitutionalism. For example, we have the examples of authoritarian models, or to give you an example, we have the example of fascist Italy and Nazist Germany. They too had a constitution, and similarly there are so many authoritarian countries, in which we can include the communist countries also, where they have a constitution. But these constitutions, they are not limiting so far as the authority and power of the government is concerned, authority and the power of the state is concerned. They can limit the rights and liberties of the individual, but the fascist constitution or the Nazist constitution of the German, they did not limit the rulers, that they did not limit the power and authority of the ruler, that be Mussolini or Hitler. They were left scot free. They can use their power and authority in any manner. The state can and the government use power and authority in any manner which they thought fit, because the constitution was helpless. Constitution was not limiting their power, and constitution was not limiting their authority. So there we had a constitution. Fascist Italy had a constitution. Nazist Germany had a constitution. But the question is, where those constitution also, imbued with constitutionalism? The answer is a big no. So we have to remember that it is possible to have a constitution, but we may not have constitutionalism therein. Now the question is that those countries, those states, and most of the democratic states who try to have a constitution along with constitutionalism, how this constitutionalism is brought into the constitution, that is very important to understand. And here we can understand it in a very simple manner, that you can bring in constitutionalism, because constitutionalism is a limiting thing, and you can bring the entire constitutionalism into the constitution by certain structural modifications or structural engineering in the constitution. For example, let us take a constitution of America, or let us take the constitution of India, for example. There we see that in every constitution, the first thing that we structurally try to limit the government is that we do not vest in one person or one institution all the powers of the government. We try to distribute or divide the powers of the government, or bring some kind of separation of powers among the various organs of the government. For example, it is the legislature, executive, and judiciary in which we distribute or divide or allocate power. So not one person or one institution is empowered to exercise all the powers on behalf of the state. And the first thing that we do is to limit the power and authority of the state is that we have a government, but in government also we distribute the entire power of the government in not one or institution or person, but in several institutions, which we broadly call legislature, executive, and judiciary. And some powers like the legislation, power of making laws, is given to the legislature. Power of execution of the laws is given to the executive, and the power of adjudication over the violation of any laws, etc., is given to the judiciary. That is one thing. If we have a federal constitution like the US Constitution and the Indian Constitution, or any other constitution like Canada or Australia, there we can see that the second component of division of power is that the power of the state is not given in one at one center, but it is distributed in several centers. For example, let us take the example of Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution is having three tiers of government: central government, a union government, state government, and the local government. And our constitution, through 7th schedule of the constitution, divides powers between all these three layers of the government. We have 7th schedule dividing power between the central government, union government, and the state governments. And we also have the 73rd and 74th amendment of the constitution that gives certain powers constitutionally vested to the local government. And thus power is distributed not at one point, but at several tiers, several levels of the state or the government, that we call federal layers or federal tiers of our federal government or union government. So this way, structurally, we can say that the power is not centralized at one place, but diffused and distributed in not only several organs, but also at several levels of the polity. That is one thing that is important. Secondly, that whatever the distribution of power that you have made, or 7th schedule of the constitution in Indian context had distributed or divided powers between the union government and the state government, and the 73rd and 74th amendment gave powers to the panchayati raj or local government. But the issue is that normally, if there is a conflict between the exercise of those powers, if the governments, they misuse their powers, if they transcend the boundaries of their limitation, then what to do? And here there is a second mechanism that is built in the constitution, and we call the judiciary, or through judiciary we try to ensure that the powers which has been given to each and every component of the government is properly exercised. Even legislature, executive, and judiciary, none can exceed the boundaries of the powers that are allocated to them. And therefore the judiciary comes into play through judicial review wherever any central government or state government or local government or any executive branch of the government at any level tries to transgress powers of others or violate or misuse its own powers, Then the judiciary comes in, and through the process of judicial review, it tries to restrain the government. It can restrain the parliament, it can restrain the executive, it can restrain the judiciary even also. And therefore, through this second mechanism, we try to inbuilt in the constitution through judicial review the power to restrain and restrict the exercise of powers if they go beyond the defined jurisdiction, or go beyond the powers allocated to that particular institution. And thus we find that this entire constitutionalism in the constitution is both structurally and functionally reinforced in any constitution. And therefore we can say that any democratic constitution without constitutionalism, without the mechanism of constitutionalism, is just a dead constitution and not is a live and dynamic constitution. And therefore all the constitutions, all the authoritarian constitutions, they are just constitutions in the namesake. But the constitution which have constitutionalism, which have powers not only allocated to one institution or but to several institutions, and especially to at federal level, in federal constitution at various levels, and also a mechanism through judicial review, they are the embodiments of, they signify the mechanism through which constitutionalism is enforced in every constitution. And thus, to have a real constitution, to have a true constitution, we must have a constitution with constitutions. Thank you very much.